Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Saturday Morning Mastermind. I'm here with my friends Catherine, Jason, and Lori. But right now we're in the book still, The Midnight Library, Matt Haig. But I'm going to let everybody jump out and introduce themselves first, and then we'll get started with the part in the book called Moving Shelves. So go ahead and introduce yourselves, everyone.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Jason from Tampa Bay.
Good morning, Lori Emmons in Denver.
Good morning, it's Catherine Clement, and I will be reading this morning, starting at the moving shelves. The shelves on either side of Nora began to move. The shelves didn't change angles, they just kept on sliding horizontally. It was possible that the shelves weren't moving at all, but the books were, and it wasn't obvious why or even how. There was no visible mechanism making it happen, and no sound or sight of books falling off the end, or rather the start of the shelf. The books slid by at varying degrees of slowness, depending on the shelf they were on, but none moved fast. What's happening? Mrs. Elm's expression stiffened, and her posture straightened, her chin retreating a little into her neck. She took a step closer to Nora and clasped her hands together. It is time, my dear, to begin. If you don't mind me asking, begin what? Every life contains many millions of decisions, some big, some small. But every time one decision is taken over another, the outcomes differ. An irreversible variation occurs, which in turn leads to further variations. These books are portals to all the lives you could be living. What? You have as many lives as you have possibilities. There are lives where you make different choices, and those choices lead to different outcomes. If you had done just one thing differently, you would have a different life story. And they all exist in the Midnight Library. They are all as real as this life. Parallel lives? Not always parallel. Some are more perpendicular. So do you want to live a life you could be living? Do you want to do something differently? Is there anything you wish to change? Did you do anything wrong? That was an easy one. Yes, absolutely everything. The answer seemed to tickle the librarian's nose. Mrs. Elm quickly rummaged for the paper tissue that was stuffed up inside the sleeve of her polo neck. She brought it quickly to her face and sneezed into it. Bless you, said Nora, watching as the tissue disappeared from the librarian's hands the moment she'd finished using it through some strange and hygienic magic. Don't worry, tissues are like lives. There are always more. Mrs. Elm returned to her train of thought. Doing one thing differently is often the same as doing everything differently. Actions can't be reversed within a lifetime, however much we try, but you are no longer within a lifetime. You have popped outside. This is your opportunity, Nora, to see how things could be. This can't be real, Nora thought to herself. Mrs. Elm seemed to know what she was thinking. Oh, it is real, Nora sighed, but it is not quite reality as you understand it. For want of a better word, it is in between. It is not life. It is not death. It is not the real world in a conventional sense. But nor is it a dream. It isn't one thing or another. It is, in short, the Midnight Library. The slow-moving shelves came to a halt. Nora noticed that on one of the shelves to her right, at shoulder height, there was a large gap. All the other areas of the shelves around her had the books tightly pressed side by side, but here, lying flat on the thin white shelf, there was only one book. And this book wasn't green like the others. It was gray as the stone of the front of the building. She had seen it through the mist, when she had seen it through the mist. Mrs. Elm took the book from the shelf and handed it to Nora. She had a slight look of anticipatory pride, as if she'd handed her a Christmas present. It had seemed light when Mrs. Elm was holding it, but it was far heavier than it looked. Nora went to open it. Mrs. Elm shook her head. You always have to wait for my say-so. Why? Every book in here, every book in this entire library, except one, is a version of your life. This library is yours. It is here for you. You see, everyone's lives could have ended up an infinite number of ways. These books on the shelves are your life, all starting from the same point in time. Right now, midnight, Tuesday, the 28th of April. But these midnight possibilities aren't the same. Some are similar, some are very different. This is cracker, said Nora. Except one? This one? Nora tilted the stone gray book towards Mrs. Elm. Mrs. Elm raised an eyebrow. Yes, that one. It's something you have written without ever having to type a word. What? This book is the source of all your problems, and the answer to them too. But what is it? It is called, my dear, the Book of Regrets. The Book of Regrets. Nora stared at it. She could see it now, the small typeface embossed on the cover. The Book of Regrets. Every regret you have ever had since the day you were born is recorded in here, Mrs. Elm said, tapping her finger on the cover. I now give you permission to open it. As the book was so heavy, Nora sat down cross-legged on the stone floor to do so. She began to skim through it. The book was divided into chapters, chronologically arranged around the years of her life. 0, 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 35. The chapters got much longer as the book progressed year by year, but the regrets she accumulated weren't specifically related to that year in question. Regrets ignore chronology. They float around. The sequence of these lists changes all the time. Right, yes, that makes sense, I suppose. She quickly realized they ranged from the minor and quotidian, I regret not doing my exercise today, to the substantial, I regret not telling my father I loved him before he died. There were continual background regrets, which repeated on multiple pages. I regret not staying in the labyrinths because I let down my brother. I regret not staying in the labyrinths because I let down myself. I regret not doing more for the environment. I regret the time I spent on social media. I regret not going to Australia with Izzy. I regret not having more fun when I was younger. I regret all those arguments with Dad. I regret not working with animals. I regret not doing geology at university instead of philosophy. I regret not learning how to be a happier person. I regret feeling so much guilt. I regret not sticking at Spanish. I regret not choosing science subjects in my A-levels. I regret not becoming a glaciologist. I regret not getting married. I regret not applying to do a master's degree in philosophy at Cambridge. I regret not keeping healthy. I regret moving to London. I regret not going to Paris to teach English. I regret not finishing the novel I started at university. I regret moving out of London. I regret having a job with no prospects. I regret not being a better sister. I regret not having a gap year after university. I regret disappointing my father. I regret that I teach piano more than I play it. I regret my financial mismanagement. I regret not living in the countryside. Some regrets were a little fainter than others. One regret shifted from practically invisible to bold and back again as if it were flashing on and off right there as she looked at it. The regret was, I regret not having children, not yet having children. That is a regret that sometimes is and sometimes isn't, explained Mrs. Elm, again somehow reading her mind. There are a few of those. From the age of 34 onwards, in the longest chapter at the end of the book, there were a lot of Dan-specific regrets. These were quite strong and bold and played in her head like an ongoing fortissimo chord in a Haydn concerto. I regret being cruel to Dan. I regret breaking up with Dan. I regret not living in a country pub with Dan. And she stared down at the pages, She thought now of the man she had so nearly married. Okay, you want to stop there?
I think that'd be a good place to stop. Terrific reading again. Thank you.
You're welcome. Dan's talking, but you're muted. I can't hear you.
Yeah. You're muted, Dan.
Oh, sorry. That was awesome. You always do such a great job. Thank you.
My pleasure. So what do you guys think about this business of having, these multiple parallel perpendicular lives that are going on simultaneously maybe, and really every decision we make leads us into yet another life?
I kind of, in a weird way, kind of agree with that, because in the minutes that we make decisions at those times, and we're making them with the best information we have at the time, or what we feel is the best decision to make, then that puts us down that road to follow that and then make subsequent decisions after making that first initial one. And then to me, that's why it brings up the list of all the regrets, though, because in some decisions we can go back to certain points in time and we could say, had I only done this, my life would be so different. And we know it would be so different, but at the same time, I think it would be different, but there would be similar aspects of some of the things that we deal with in the current life too. It's just, and I think that's when we all get down to it, when we are on our deathbed for, and those of us that have a chance to, we're not killed instantly or something like that. But if we have a chance to kind of look back at our lives, the biggest thing that weighs on us are all the list of regrets. And we start going through them and saying, well, I should have done that, or why didn't I do that? Or I think that's, this book kind of explains it pretty well.
I just had the thought while you're reading that to take the time to make a list of things I regret just seems counterproductive, but it also might make sense to be aware of those, because there's obviously some that are going to jump out that, yeah, I regret this and I regret that. I just don't want to get into that mindset. It's kind of like looking back and saying coulda, shoulda, woulda, and just not getting anywhere with it.
I think it might help to look back a little bit and think, what are some things I regret that I might be able to correct at the moment. Like if there's something that happened at an event recently or even a while back with someone, and you could reach back out to them and say, hey, when we did this, actually, you could clear the air or make up for that regret somehow and say whatever it is you meant to say. I think it'd be more helpful, like you said. I mean, looking back at all our regrets can kind of be counterproductive too, I guess. So we don't want to be stuck there, but to the impact that it could have positively on going forward, it might be good. So maybe looking forward and trying to think of how we are going to be a few years down the road, and what regrets we might have at that point about what we're doing now, I think that's very helpful. And getting back to the question you asked, Catherine, in regards to making the decisions, I kind of get the sense that we sort of avoid making decisions that will pull us away from what our overall the overall picture that we believe our life should turn out like, and we sort of, at least seems like for me, that I sort of kind of make decisions that or choose paths in my life that will sort of have a way of being able to fold back into that bigger picture down the road, where they were saying in the book, some lives run perpendicular, completely, 90-degree change of what you're doing. I think quite often there is opportunity to kind of come back and get back onto a path that is more familiar with us down the road. So, but yeah, it's very interesting.
I was
It
going to.
kind of-
Oh, go ahead.
It kind of flies in the face of you can't change the past. And
We're looking at
Right.
regrets.
yes, or anything, because things happen in our lives that we have no control over, like who your parents are and how you were raised, and until a certain age of accountability, whatever, you can't change any of that have totally affected your timelines along the way.
Sure.
I was going to jump out and throw out that maybe after reading this book, it makes me think that, well, by stopping and taking a real hard look at some of the regrets that I have, does that, and now going back, and if I feel still strong enough about some of those things, maybe there's still time to do that, because some of the regrets I have would have changed my life, but I think in some ways they would have made it better, and in some ways they would have still run kind of parallel to the life I have now. Just I may have been in another place or another, area, or and it might have changed the type of friends I have and stuff. But at the same point, if we can take that moment to stop and really sit and say, okay, what is that one big thing that really is really nagging me, or really in the back of my head that I really wish I would have done, but now I feel, oh, I can't because of this, that, or the other thing. But rather than letting fear, and I think a lot of times that's part of when we make original decisions, some of it is the fear of the unknown and we're being afraid, or we don't have the right, we don't feel it's the right setup, or we don't feel we have the right support, or whatever the decisions are at that time. Well, maybe now, if we, instead of wait until the end of life, just look back at the regrets, periodically stop and purposely look at regrets and see what are some that I can maybe still actively change and incorporate into my life, into that big picture that we all have of how we, we think our lives should go. But then again, sometimes our lives take their own paths on their own, and we just kind of go along with it. We kind of get swept up in it and don't take that time to even stop, even then, to say, okay, is this really where I want to be, or is this really, we just kind of go with it too. So I think, this book is opening our eyes to a little bit of the fact that sometimes maybe we have a little more control than we'd like to admit. And so then that way we can play it off as, oh, oh, I didn't, I didn't really have a lot of say in that, or I didn't, it wasn't right, giving back a little bit of ownership back to us. And it might go back in to some of the other books we read, where even though some of the other books where we said, okay, we made agreements or whatever, when we come down to live the type of lives that we're living, maybe deep down, maybe we have a little idea of what that is. I mean, we may not know, but maybe something inside of us kind of says that gut feeling or that intuition or whatever. So I know maybe this is a way to kind of rebalance ourselves, maybe.
I think that oh, sorry.
No, please go ahead.
I think that it can be extremely helpful to write down regrets, or what I did was, and it came about not as a self-improvement exercise. Oh, I'm going to write this down and, help myself. It came out of a question that someone asked me, and I responded in a way, something about guilt. And they said, well, what do you feel guilty about? And that question, I was like, oh my God, what do I feel guilty about? I wrote out like 5 solid pages of things that I feel guilty about. Now, should I feel guilty about those things? No, I shouldn't. but I do. And it like, I haven't revisited that list since I wrote it, to tell you the truth. But just the act of writing it was so like, those are all things that I never admitted to myself, that I was feeling, that I had never admitted to myself. I had never just put it out there in front of me. So I think that it helped unburden me in many ways, just to get it out of my body by writing it, for one thing, and to see all these thoughts that I had in my head that I just keep stuffing into the background. I don't sit around all day in a depressed mood feeling guilty about these things, but that doesn't mean they're not still there. See what I mean? So it was very helpful for me. Like, I had no idea. I thought I was going to write maybe 2 or 3 sentences, and I wound up writing 5 pages, So I think there's a lot of things in our head, in our mind, that we push away, that we don't allow to bubble up to the surface. We constantly keep pushing that beach ball down under the water, and yet it will continue to pop up to the surface. And so those things that we don't acknowledge to ourselves, they still surface to us, usually through, and some people believe this and some people don't, but I find it in my life to be true, that these things that I don't acknowledge about myself, or feelings that I'm feeling that I'm not acknowledging, they will show themselves to me through the actions of another person, mirroring that back to me. And so when somebody's really irritating me, all I have to do is look at what they're doing that's irritating me, and I'll see that it's something in me that either I'm not expressing, I wish I could express, but I don't. That's usually it. Like, somebody's, standing up for themselves, or doing something that I wish that I had the guts to do, or whatever, and it kind of irritates me. It's a weird sort of thing when people mirror things for you. It's interesting how it just gets under your skin enough to try to figure it out. But most of the time we just get angry, and angry is a much easier emotion to experience and handle than hurt or sadness, you know. So we just immediately want to go towards the anger because it's just easier. It doesn't hurt nearly as bad.
It kind of helps you feel justified. My roommate is always saying, "Why are you so angry?" And I'm like, well, when you want to do something you should be able to do, like feed yourself, it can cause anger feelings. And being such an independent person, I want to do it myself. It's funny, my mom says one of the first stories she ever told me about being a little baby in my crib, and she said something. I stood up and stomped my foot and said, "I can do it myself." And I just get so angry sometimes that I can't do it myself. Now, having MS and things just don't work right, and it's hard not to think about, what did I do wrong? Where did I not take care of myself? That this should just happen sometimes, I swear. I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting how we can push things back and underneath and under, and yet they always bubble up somehow, some way, in some shape and form. And we might lightly, and I say lightly, loosely, meaning we just deal with it at the moment, but usually not in the best way. And then it goes right back under, the surface, to where, instead of like what you said, Catherine, where the way somebody asked you about that, and then you wrote down and you thought, oh, well, I'll write a couple sentences, maybe, and next thing you know, you're writing 5 pages. But I bet it was also very cathartic for you to kind of release a lot of that and not feel it pent up in you and wasting. And the way I say this, I hope it makes sense, but internal energy on, I'm going to say mush, even though it's not mush, but it's, stuff that we deal with, subconsciously in the back of our minds, and it's kind of always there, and it creeps up in the most inopportune time too, also. And which then again, like for me, it'll irritate me. It's like, why am I thinking about this now? I've got other things to think about. Why did it have to rear its ugly head now? But if I really take the time and really address it as best I can, maybe even just writing it out, or in this case, if there are regrets or something, really taking the time to sit down and metaphorically take that book off the shelf and look at it and say, okay, what are these major regrets that I have? And is there anything I can do to alleviate it, correct it, fix it, or settle it once and for all and say, okay, that is the choice I made, that I don't want to have regrets on it anymore. I have made that choice. I'm not going to go back that way. So why let it bother me anymore too? And maybe that's part of what this book is, this book is helping to illuminate, that, we're so busy, and I've used that term loosely, but we're so busy with so many things. And, do we ever really take time for introspect into ourselves, so that way we can really weed out a lot of things?
Then taking too much time introspecting and letting that monkey mind, that where we stuff all that stuff, just clutter up your thoughts and your actions, and probably even your beliefs, because you believe things that you have done things a certain way in the past. And now to be conscious of everything all of your actions, your responses or reactions is really a mind-boggling activity. It seems to do too much of it.
I just had a thought, and it quickly slipped out of my mind. The um, I think balance has a lot to do with it, Lori. Um, but I also was thinking that what's kind of helpful is that if we do, we take the time to maybe dig into an aspect of our feelings like Catherine did, and then we are able to, we're able to maybe use our the knowledge we've gained through our lifetime to readdress and better understand what happened when we experienced that event that's causing some guilt or regret. But sometimes I think we also, our memory fades and we forget, we're left with the regret, but we forget what all the events and what the things we were going through at the time that caused us to make the decision or even not make a decision that's ended up leaving us with the feeling of regret or remorse or guilt. So sometimes it might help to look back and think about those times and be like, well, why did I do that? Or why didn't I do that? And what was going on that caused me to, that caused that. And then also, I think it's also helpful to maybe do a little studying into what that feeling means, not just to ourselves, but to what it has meant to other people, what some authority figures have had to say about the same type of feelings or occurrences that might give us a better understanding, so we can better understand ourselves and what we went through, and maybe put it in a new perspective. For instance, we spoke about fear, Dan. I think some things such as fear, our personal fears or personal things that make us angry, things that we might experience like that we don't really, or guilt or whatever it might be, that we don't bring up to ourselves. We don't acknowledge ourselves. We just try to push past it. We certainly, those are things that we certainly don't bring up to others very often. And so we probably don't do a lot of, make a lot of effort into understanding how other people are also going through the same thing. But when we do that, that tends to help us to not feel as alone, and may give us a little more perspective and knowledge that we can better understand our own actions and maybe even allow us to forgive ourselves, or at least understand what we went through at the time in the past. So some thoughts.
Kind of got my hackles up thinking that there's an authority figure that might know my life better or have guided me in a different way. I'm like, if we're supposed to be the authority of our own lives, and I guess we are. I believe we are.
Well,
But
not
to
an
have-
authority figure on our life, but an authority figure, like, for instance, I was actually looking up fear, it was interesting because fears can be big fears, they can be little fears, fears can not even seem like they're fears, but they can be fears, there's all these different levels, and you don't normally think of it that way, but I was looking at procrastination, and they've done a lot of studies about that, and there's in college students, and they've boiled it down to like four things that you have like the perfectionist, and you have the worrier, and you have two other psychological types that cause people to procrastinate. So it's not people think procrastination is just a form of laziness, but when they've done these studies, they've learned a different understanding about it. And fear can be the same thing. And so I was watching a show the other night, and they mentioned part of the script was a riddle about fear, and then it became the idea of knowing thyself, know thy enemy, and you know thyself, and the enemy being fear, and that fear is that you have nothing to fear but fear itself, and fear, and and I was different. And it was talking of hinted about Sun Tzu's Art of War, and just like there's a lot of different ways to look at something. And I think that so these different ways of looking at something, that's what I mean by an authority on something, not necessarily authority on my life, but authority on something that is maybe impacting my life. Yeah, I hope that helps.
That makes sense.
It's interesting, and I agree to a point where you talk about fear, and fear is a big thing that, and I'm going to say it this way, even though it probably not coming out right the way I'm thinking, is fear is a big factor that does in a lot of ways guide our lives. But I think it goes back to like what you were just saying, Justin. If you know thyself and know fear and understand, that's where you can then maybe get the upper hand on those fears to be able to still walk through that. So that way down the road, and that might be part of the thing, is maybe so then that way down the road, you don't have the regret of that one thing maybe. And that might be, hopefully, maybe that's a little bit more what this book is also trying to point out, is sometimes, like to me, it seems like Nora, Nora, she was so afraid of just trying because she was so afraid of how it might turn out, whether it was good or bad. So she built up and let, I think in her case, fear be the big guiding thing in her life, rather than looking back and saying, no, I really want to push through this so I get over this fear. Kind of like back when I've talked about before, where I have a slight fear of heights. Well, I have a fear of heights, but I'm working on conquering that. And about 8 or 9 years ago, after going to an event, I finally came home and decided to work on, and there we have a small little mountain. It's not that big, but it was big enough that when you get up to the top and you look down, it's like, ooh, I could really hurt myself if I fall. I decided to climb that mountain with no ropes, no nothing. I went up on the more steep side, where had I known the other side was a little more at an angle, that wouldn't have helped me. But by doing it on the way I did it, I pushed through that fear. So in that sense, I think sometimes, like I think fear can be a big guide in our lives that we don't want it to be, but we allow it to be. And I think we can do that with certain aspects of our lives, and along with whatever we believe, like with what my beliefs are and things like that, and coupling that all in together. I think sometimes we tie our own hands, and which then brings up the regrets, which then at the end of life we wish, well, why hadn't I just done that? And going back to what I said earlier, I think reading these 2 chapters kind of helps say there's nothing wrong with stopping and looking and reviewing and looking at some of those regrets to see if some of them you need to just wipe out and say they're irrelevant anymore. So that way they don't have that hold on you, or looking at a couple and saying, oh, well, maybe I want to really revisit this and look and maybe make some new choices and new changes in my life that hopefully will continue on that path, like you said, Jason, of what we believe our lives should be.
Well, the thing about regrets is that they're always based on, like, we think, well, if I had only done that, then everything would have been okay. Or if I'd have done that, if I'd agreed to marry that dude, then this would have happened and this would have happened. And we don't know if that stuff would happen. And it's often based on making comparisons to what we see making other people happy, what we think we're seeing making other people happy, because as we all know, everybody's wearing a mask. So people are appearing to be happy when they're not happy. I mean, wouldn't you agree that there's been many times when you've smiled or laughed or appeared to be happy when you weren't really happy? You were just putting on that facade for other people. So here we are basing our own happiness on stuff that we don't even know is real to begin with. Like, I'm also reading the book, The Myth of Normal by Gabor Mate. I think that's how you say his name. Gabor, I don't know. But anyway, he's a pretty good dude. It's a good book. And, we all basically, what it's talking about is how we all kind of have this quote, air quote, normal, that we compare our lives to, that and it is our telling ourselves that we are, quote, not normal, or that we are broken, or that we are whatever less than we should be. We look at other people and we see them as, quote, air quote, normal. And there is no normal. It's a myth, and everybody experiences all of these emotions. Even the person that has what we look at and we see as like the very best life on earth, like they have everything handed to them, or whatever it is, whatever you look at that you think is the best, you can look at that, but you have no idea what those people are going through in reality. They could be the most miserable person in the world, and they're just really good at putting on a smile. So we don't know. And as far as anger goes, Lori, and this is coming from a uh, I don't like the word, but a disabled place. In other words, there are things that I just cannot do physically, just like there are things that you just cannot do physically because of our conditions. I find that anger pops up a lot for me in those moments when I am feeling like I can't do something. it's the anger that actually generates the energy, because a lot of times I'm just so energy depleted that sometimes I can't do it because I just don't feel like I literally have the energy to do it. But if I get angry, it generates the energy and I can do it. Like, I have been able to push through so much stuff, especially when my foot was really bad and I couldn't put weight on it. It's like, I've come a long way in the last couple of years with this foot, you guys. But there was a point where not even wind could touch my foot. Like, it was so painful, not even wind could blow against my foot, much less trying to put on a sock or a shoe or touch it or put any weight on it or anything. Like, it was horrible. And going to physical therapy and different things and just trying to get things done around the house, I would just get so angry that it gave me the adrenaline and the energy to put weight on that foot or to do something that hurt so badly, but I had to get angry. And I can see that from a couple different ways. For one thing, it's a higher energetic scale than despair, obviously, or sadness. It is a bump up energetically. But also, when you get angry, it does generate our bodies are chemical. So when we get angry, it really does generate chemistry in our body that gives us the ability to do things that we were unable to do. And maybe it's not a pretty way to get there, but it's a way to get there. And it serves. Anger serves. Like, for a long time, in my family growing up, anger was the only emotion you were able to show. And as a kid, I wasn't able to show anger. I had to stuff that. But I mean, as far as the adults, the only emotion that was ever showed was anger. So anger scares me a great deal because I've had so many encounters with angry people that did physical harm to me. So anger is an emotion that I can stuff very easily. And, there's tons of people out there that'll tell you that everything that's wrong with you is because you're stuffing shit and it's all from your childhood. And there's a lot to be said. I mean, there is a lot to be said for that. Like, you do have to go back and examine, where did you get these? Why do you react this way to things? But, whether it actually cures what's physically wrong with us, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. I think, Lori, I think you and I agreed, for whatever reason, we agreed to come into these bodies that couldn't do the things that we want them to do, or that give us pain all the time, or whatever it is. We have different things going on, you and I, but I think we chose these bodies. And in our moments, at least in my moments of why the fuck did I do this kind of thing, like, I just kind of give myself grace and just forgive myself for not remembering why I chose this. I give myself grace and forgive myself for not remembering why I chose this.
Yeah, I think our emotions can serve us good and bad. Depending on how you look at it and stuff. Fear also has a place. Sometimes when something scary is going on and you have that fight or flight or thing, but and I think that's another part on the other side. Fear also is a big thing that also, oh, I've already said fear, but I think the unknown also is a big thing that can kind of guide our lives. It's not so much fear, but it's the unknown of things too, which I think takes a big chunk in our lives too. And I think that can be help lead towards a lot of regrets too. And so I think that's another area, that if we took a little more of a look at, and break down what exactly the unknown is, so we can then break down the fear and maybe work those two together, then maybe as we make choices, and there are times where you have to make a choice right then and there. You can't really, dissect it and, go through it all. But there are times where you can sit there and really take the time to really look at, okay, what is the unknown? What don't I know? What are my fears? And then maybe go forward. Or then when you come back and look at regrets, use that thought process of, okay, what are the fears and what don't I know? And then maybe go there based on what you've lived already now, to maybe go back and revisit and maybe change and remove the regret.
I think it definitely helps to at least understand where the feelings are coming from. Sometimes we don't realize, and we just kind of dump the feelings in with all the other feelings. It was interesting to me, and doing a little bit of studying about fear, that one authority was saying that just inaction can cause fear. That by not doing what you're kind of putting off can cause fear to well up inside of you. And that was very interesting to me. Then I thought about everybody going through COVID in the past years, and how we were kind of forced not to do anything, and how it did seem like there was a lot more fear in the world over time during that time. May not have anything to do with with inaction, but it made sense to me in certain things about maybe wanting, like if you think about wanting to confront someone about something, and you decide to kind of think about it more and put it off, and by doing that and being not taking action on it, you kind of start to think, you start to become a different type of fear that wells up about that situation. It's like, well, now it's been 2 weeks, or now it's been, and there's these other things that might add to the fear, or but it's but knowing where the feelings are coming from, if they're justified, if there's and being able to, I guess, like you were saying earlier, and about having some balance. I even think she mentioned it in the book. Maybe the librarian said something about balance. But it's a very interesting discussion. And I've noticed that when she was talking about her regrets, she touched on a lot of different topics. She touched on family, touched on friends. She had some personal regrets. She touched on family and not being able to say, tell her, I think it was her father, that she loved him before he passed away. That has, that was, personal on her. She felt like she wanted to be able to say that, and with her friends, and letting her friends down, letting herself down, her career, and what she thought she could accomplish. And then also, I think she mentioned about something that would be impactful on the world. So there's a lot of there's a lot of opportunity to feel guilty, and to have these feelings of regret, or So it's I think getting in control and ahead of our emotions is, gosh, I think like this book is, maybe that's the reason this book was written, was to kind of put it out there so people had the opportunity to have a better understanding of what we might come into, what we might experience down the road before we get there. Because as we say a lot of times, is, oh, I wish we had that information way back when. Yeah, could have been more useful, but still can be useful. We can move forward and decide, well, I know for me, there's certain things I can't do, and it's anymore that I always love to do. I almost was like thinking, well, as long as I can do this, then everything will be okay. As long as I can, do this certain activity, then I'll be able to escape and be able to have that balance. And then when that's taken away, it can be very difficult. And but it's also an opportunity to find something new and do something different and figure out a new way of doing things, or which is maybe not what we want to be doing, but that's I don't know, that's just a way of looking at it, I guess. Some very
Thank
deep
you.
stuff we're talking about.
Thank you
So
for bringing me back to what Catherine was saying. And I regret not learning how to do ballroom dancing when my body was able to do that. And maybe if I had learned that, it would have been something that prevented or improved my ability to do that. And it's really easy to get in the anger of it, especially when we compare and contrast and compete with all of this stuff we see on social media. It's like, is your life really like that? It's hard to believe and hard to know who or what is real and true and completely honest. Because when you get down to it, most of us are not completely honest, even with ourselves.
That's so true. We're not. And you're right, social media just puts so much out there more for us to like compare ourselves to, right? And think that we're less than, or maybe sometimes people think that they're more than, or whatever. But usually I think people will compare themselves and see themselves as not as good as somebody else. But that's why this myth of normal is I'm glad that he's talking about it. One of the things that he talks about in there, I think he's a psychologist. I'm not sure what he is, but one of the things he talks about, and it made me think of what you said, Jason, is when you talk about going to an authority figure, you have to be careful what authority figure you go to, because there's a lot of people out there that, especially now with social media, like if you spend one day in a weekend thing, like a weekend event, conference or whatever, you're suddenly an expert on that. If you have any business on the internet, because the internet is international, you're an internationally known business. Like, people pump themselves up these days like never, ever, ever, ever has happened, in history, because we haven't had this ability to do this. And now with Chat GPT, people like take that knowledge and proclaim that as their own, and suddenly they're geniuses overnight. Like, you have to be careful what authority figure, and even within like well, I'll just say it because it's in his book, and I knew this before I read it in his book, is because I've been preaching it for years. All of these psychiatric diagnoses and things that they have, and this business of telling people that it's a chemical imbalance, and we have to give you this drug to rebalance your chemistry because you were born without Prozac in your body. Like, there's a reason you were born without Prozac. Nobody, I don't want any hate mail, you guys, but seriously, this is all made up shit. All this psychiatric stuff that they diagnose people with, that they put people in places, like all these drugs that they're giving, it's all, you cannot produce a research piece of science that shows these chemical imbalances corrected with these drugs. You can't. And yes, they do work and they help people. And I'm on a drug that is mind altering. It's an anti-epileptic drug, and it affects the way that my mind works. And it helps with this pain. Like, it helps me deal with this pain. So I get it. Like, they do, the chemistry of the drug does change our body chemistry, and it can give results. But that doesn't mean that was the initial cause. The initial cause of most, if not all, psychiatric things going on is environment. It boils down to experiences and reactions to those experiences, and each person's own fortitude to handle such experiences. And we're all so different. What completely just floors one person, like just totally disgusts them, or totally makes them fall into a depression, or makes them so angry they want to go in and shoot up a place, to another person, that same remark would have absolutely no effect. It would have no effect. Like, they wouldn't even have noticed the comment was made. And yet this other person, because of whatever has happened to them in their past and their ability or inability to deal with it, goes completely off the rails, whether it's in an anger way or a sadness way or an offended way. Offense is like that's the biggest emotion these days. Everybody's offended at everything. Nobody can be themselves. Like, I don't really understand what's going on. And it may be, in many people's eyes, unhealthy to isolate, but I'm quite fine isolating from all this craziness in the world. I really am. I have no issue with not getting involved in all of that chaos out there.
I have to completely agree.
So, there's just one behavior that some people would consider, oh, there's something wrong with her. She doesn't want to go out. She doesn't want to socialize. She doesn't want to do all this and that. Well, whatever. But, there's just a lot of stuff I don't want to get involved in. And so back to my initial thing, you just have to be really careful which authority you're going to, because even if it's within our own medical system and they're teaching it as science, it is not science. It's not science. It's a theory that somehow got repeated over and over until it became a belief of our scientific community, and yet it was never based on research and science. So I don't know how to tell what's real and what's not real out there in internet land, but do your best to make sure that your resources are legitimate, and that read the research yourself. Don't even because even the research papers, the way they word things is so deceiving. Like, you really have to be careful where there's a lot of deep fake stuff out there, you guys, and so much of the world is in this oppositional energy right now of they're just there's I don't know, it's just one against another about everything, and there's a lot of defiance and opposition, and those are all survival behaviors. They're kind of like caged animal trapped kind of behaviors going on, and unfortunately it's all fueled by fear, like you guys were talking about earlier. It's all fueled by fear, and that fear is being driven a lot by social media and the news outlets and stuff. They just constantly, I see that here, where wherever you're at, though, you see it on the news where they're just constantly keeping everybody's adrenaline. It's a wonder anybody has any in their body left, because they're constantly trying to keep you in fear. This is going to happen, that's going to happen, this is going to happen, that. Well, God forbid, if we truly are manifesting beings, then please don't watch the news. I mean, I try not to watch the news. I'm kind of in a place where I'm sort of forced to watch the news, but I don't watch it. I have my mind on other things. So I look like I'm watching it, but I'm not. I'm trying not to take it in, because if we really are manifesting things, just think about all that stuff that's on the media and what we're actually manifesting and what some people are manifesting. You know what I mean? Like, it's scary when you think about it. How much?
Very much so.
Yeah.
And it's, I guess, the idea that there is no authority figure on these topics we're talking about, on what is quote unquote normal, because there's too many timelines and thought patterns, because nothing exists that wasn't a thought first. And so all the things that's creating humans to think is getting pretty scary.
Well, thank you for bringing that up, Catherine, in regards to authority, because that is that's so true. You have to be very careful about where you're getting, your information from, especially in regards to something that can be life altering, and I always choose to go to as many sources as I can, and try to make them all as reputable as possible. And then one of the best pieces of advice I've ever heard was to take things with a grain of salt. And at a young age, that you kind of see, well, how can that authority, that authority figure, how reputable is that authority figure, right? But then how can what they said actually be helpful to me? And is there a line there that I don't want to cross? And maybe I should just kind of better understand things before I make a move on that. But yeah, there's thanks for bringing that up, because that is important. Not all authority figures are actually reputable. And then, like you were saying about psychiatry and all that stuff, and some of the medicine out there, it's that data can be manipulated, and things can be left out, and a lot of that medication can cause a lot more other problems, and usually there's a environmental aspect that can be changed or tweaked to help you, if not alleviate your symptoms completely, but can help you get to the next step, to where then you can get to the following step and get closer and closer to where you need to be. But yeah, I totally agree with what you were saying, yeah, I also, Lori, with everyone, there's a lot of thoughts out there. There's a lot of people creating things, manifesting things with their thoughts, apparently. But and I look on with television, I hear a lot of successful people saying they turn off the TV. They don't even have a TV around in places that they do work and try to get things done. They've like completely gotten rid of their television. We're in more control over online stuff to turn things off and stop and everything. Yet we are being manipulated, or they're trying to, the advertising, and different ways of psychological them being able to stir up emotions, and even subliminally. I remember back in the 80s, everybody was worried about subliminal messages in tapes and records and on TV, and now you can, they've fine-tuned it so much to where maybe it's not a subliminal message, but it's a suggestion, it's an image, it's just flashing, flickering light in a commercial that gets your attention to come over and start watching the commercial or something. I was studying marketing and advertising. I'm so much more aware of that stuff than I think a lot of other people. But it's frustrating to see it because it's so pervasive. Even when you get away from that and you get out into the real, the quote real world, and you're inundated by all this marketing and signs and smells and sounds that everyone's vying for your attention. So the better we can become at protecting ourselves from that stuff, whatever we got to do, the better we are. But all of what you said, guys, is so helpful, I think. Thought-provoking at the very least. Thank you so much.
I was going to say, I think we've been getting a little off topic here. Getting back to the book and stuff like that, because a lot of this is not talking what we were originally talking about with the book. Love the conversation. It was a great conversation, but getting back in more to our thoughts and our regrets and how things within that aspect, and some of this does play into it, some of these other aspects, but in looking back at what these two sections we're talking about, I think that we can let a lot of these other things that we were just talking about in, and they can have a play into what decisions we make. But going back and looking at down the road, and in her case, she's being able to see them all listed, right? I'm sure we, in our heads, we all know, the regrets we have, and we could, if we really sat down, we could probably, like Catherine, list all the things and, come up with a whole degree of them. And I'm going to throw something. How many of us are really interested in really? It's weird how when we get towards the end of life, and as I've gotten older, I've kind of started looking more at some of the things I regretted doing. But how many of us are really going to take the time and the energy to actively really look at them? And is that something that any of us are really going to really do? Is that, that's another decision. And now having this book bring these things up, it's like, okay, am I going to regret someday not having sat down and really looked at some of these regrets and seeing if I could have changed some courses or altered so my trajectory going forward might fit in more with what I originally was dreaming about when I was younger, stuff or things like that. So it's interesting how this can really play into everything that, our whole life, it's interesting how everything can play into all of this, and how little time and effort sometimes we take to put that energy into it when we're so vested in it. And a lot of times we don't like the outcomes.
I love you all. Have a great week.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Dan. And I also like what you were saying earlier about, you mentioned ownership, and that kind of ties into what you're saying. It's like taking ownership. We kind of have to do things all at the same time. Take ownership, give ourselves forgiveness, seek some new knowledge, do some introspection. We have to be willing to put the time in for that. And I guess that's what we do each week here, and throughout the week, we're trying to give ourselves a little leg up, a little boost up, a little better understanding about how we can help ourselves and make sense of everything, and have an better impact on ourselves and the rest of the world, hopefully. So thank you so much, everybody. Have a great weekend, a great weekend, great holiday, and hope to see everybody back here next weekend.
I'll just close it out then. Thanks again, Catherine. You did an awesome job reading. You always do. I love listening to you read. I'll be honest, it kind of reminds me of my grandmother when she read, not saying that you're old by any means or anything like that, but you have that same style that she had when she would read. So it is a pleasure when I get to listen to you read for us. We're the Saturday Morning Mastermind. You can find it at Facebook at Mindset Mastery Collective. You can also go to YouTube and also find us there at Mindset Mastery Collective. You can see all the information on Facebook about us. YouTube has all our videos that we've done over the last 10 years or so, I think now. And you can go to our website at mindsetmasterycollective.com. That will direct you on how to join us, be on the panel, get on the discussion. We would love to hear and see others here and to share their thoughts and views. Please give us a like, a thumbs up, a heart, whatever it takes, to help share that information out. And we look forward to seeing you next week on the Saturday Morning Mastermind.